prominent. That's also true due to the fact of exactly like how you said, social media, computers, technology. When we think of this, the cyberbullying that comes into play, just as it affected Dawn Marie in this incident, is that, like you said, when you went to school, right, it was you went 5 days a week, maybe a sixth day for something extracurricular, but that was limited. But you knew, okay, well, I'm there, like 8 hours, maybe 10, including the bus ride. But then you would have the weekends off from your tormentors or bulliers, as it were. But nowadays, it's 24/7, 365 days a year. There is no escape. You leave school, you start getting bullied and slurs and threats on your cell phone. Your computer, you go in your emails, there it is, or someone saying something bad on you on a website, creating a fake Facebook account for you until you have to move mountains to get, Facebook potentially maybe to remove it, although they're stepping up their anti-bullying efforts, which I applaud Facebook for. But there's still a long way to go. Just the technology has not caught up to what's going on or being done by kids. So the people that are bullying, the kids that are the tormentors, are tormenting their targets 24/7. There's no freedom from it. You can't escape it. You have to use your cell phone to communicate, and here's, a slew of text messages coming in, or instant messages, or something on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or, they're being social media'd sometimes to death in some of that regard, in addition to the threat. And I think our society as a whole as well has just become more violent and at times can turn a blind eye toward things. We become so desensitized from all the things that we see that, we're maybe assaulted with on TV and all these disturbing images, that it does create that culture of aggression with kids. Like, for instance, in Dawn Marie's situation, when these girls, particularly the one, threatened to kill her, they were like, we're going to kill you and they're not going to find your body. In addition to the fact that about 6 months earlier in a town not far away from Dawn Marie, a 14-year-old girl was literally beaten to death by a group of boys and girls. So the threat was real. They were like, we're going to kill you like that girl was, except in your case, they're not going to find your body. So, and then they were like, and then after you, we're going to come after your best friend, and then we're going to come after your brother. So to Dawn Marie, she thought by removing herself from the equation, she thought, number one, she would die on her own terms, but number two, that she would potentially save her friend, her brother, her family from being potentially hurt, threatened, what have you. So it's definitely become more serious, more aggressive, and things just need to be done and addressed, like we talked about legislation and things in schools and creating new programs, anti-bullying programs, and focusing on them and not saying like, oh, we have an anti-bullying kit. I don't know what that means. We keep a kit in the office. And these are things that parents have said to me, and they're like, the schools need to implement it on a daily basis and talk about it, and the counselors need to say you can come to us and discuss it. The other thing that I found with some of my research at some schools is that if one person reports that they're being bullied, sometimes the school will be like in their zero tolerance policies, which they, it sounds good, like we have zero tolerance for bullying, but let's say Joe beats up Mike, and then both Joe and Mike are suspended or potentially expelled. Now, clearly that doesn't help the target. They didn't do anything wrong. They got beaten up, and then they got punished for getting beaten up. So a lot of times they won't report it. If the school doesn't know about it, the target who's being attacked won't report it for that reason. So schools need to redefine I think, some of their zero tolerance and make sure that it's zero tolerance toward bullying, but not also punishing the target.
Right.
And in addition to that, the schools also need to not just be like, oh, you're a bully, so that means you're bad forever, and, we're not going to help you or get you any counseling. Because if someone's bullying, number one, they could be getting bullied at home. They could be getting physically abused, sexually abused, verbally abused. They could be getting bullied by their kids, wherever, or another adult somewhere, and they're taking out that aggression.
Right.
And so the bully also needs to get separate counseling to find out what's the root cause of this, what's going on with this particular case of aggression. Now, in some instances, yes, you will have a sociopath who has no empathy or concern, and there's really no reason other than they like to instill fear in others. But for the most part, a bully is acting out because something's going on, whether they have a mental health issue that needs to be addressed and diagnosed and worked on, or, like I said, there's something else going on in the background that they need help with.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you hear about it all the time, somebody that was abused by a sexual offender and then becomes one themselves, and that's just how bullying works as well. Something's going on somewhere, and I would bet that probably, at least 98% of the bullies out there are being bullied by somebody else, or something else is happening to them to where they're letting it out on somebody at school.
Right. And the thing, too, is in some cases, like I talked about communication issues, for instance, like with girl bullying, it is somewhat different than boys who bully. With girls, it tends to be more psychological and mental and emotional. It can get physical, but it's more feeding off of someone's psychological makeup and making them feel bad. And it can start as simply as one girl doesn't like another girl because maybe the bully is jealous of the other girl. Maybe the other girl got, something as simple as a new handbag, or a designer handbag, and that the bully's like jealous of that. So it can start as simple as that. And I've literally work with parents in cases of this where it's something as simple as that. But the bully, the aggressor, doesn't know how to communicate those feelings or come to terms with, oh, I'm just really jealous of this. So instead it could start out with, oh, I just hate that girl because of what she wears, what she says. And from there, with girls, sometimes the mentality, there's actually a clinical term for it called relational aggression with girls, that it becomes, for a girl, it's not enough for one girl to hate another girl. She has to get all the other girls to hate that girl, to hate the target.
Right.
And it just becomes sort of this pack mentality thing of emotional and psychological warfare, if you will.
And a lot of times, I mean, I've seen so many movies. I just watched one, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where the girl that is the victim starts dating the ex-boyfriend of somebody, and then it goes from there, and she, that person can't get over that her ex-boyfriend has moved on with somebody else, and the poor girl that's dating him, gets the abuse and a lot of times ends up dead from it.
Right. That happens quite a bit. And again, with emails I get or calls from parents, that scenario, I've seen it play out, as well as it's been publicized in probably a couple of bullycide incidents where that has occurred. And again, it hinges on communication. And kind of what I talked about, if schools can set up some type of communication, human relations class to deal with these issues.
Right.
Because, you have kids who, to them, they just haven't learned how to deal with that sort of social issue or relationship issue, right, where someone breaks up with someone and now they've moved on and they don't know how to handle that. And again, so it comes down to a lot of communication and that if schools can implement these things. And I also understand the stress that teachers are under, because many teachers would love to have this, but it's not in their budget. I mean, so many teachers have to bring in their own pens, pencils, and paper for their students. So, they're trying to fight an uphill battle. And, it just needs to come more from our government leaders to set up funding for this, from taxpayer money, and provide funding for additional classes and all of that on communication and bullying. And so as a society, if we, write to our congresspeople, send them a quick email, leave a phone call saying these issues are important to me, those officials will get put on notice that their constituents want this topic addressed, and will look to address more legislation or more funding for schools to address these issues.
Yeah, that would definitely be good. I was wondering, I'm just curious, what initially prompted you to become an advocate for bullying prevention and a leader in the bullying and teen suicide prevention cause?
Right. That's a question again that I get asked, and so I have to wonder. I've wondered at times, what was it? I guess just when I was in school, for instance, like I tended to be in leadership roles, like editor-in-chief of the newspaper and what have you, and I would see certain things going on like this, and I would always try to step in and help the person being targeted and all of that. And when I started to hear of more bullying going on, and it just was really when I saw that episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show. And I just was so horrified by the fact that here was this 14-year-old girl, and she wanted to be an actress. And so I think also, I felt perhaps a kinship with that she was a bright girl, an intelligent girl, well-liked, but then this happened where one girl became jealous of her and threatened her, and I just was so shocked and horrified that this 14-year-old girl would get up on a chair, not, to be graphic, but, it's what happened, and that she killed herself, that she felt things were so bad, that she was so threatened that she had to take her own life. And just to see the devastation it caused the family, just me as someone who's always been kind of a social advocate, whether human rights, animal rights, I just was like, enough. And I was like, if I can bring attention to this subject through the eyes of one person, because sometimes some issues are so large that you feel, I can't do anything because it's so big. But as a filmmaker, as a writer, if you can address an issue but tell it through a singular story that people can connect to, can relate with, then they can start thinking about that issue and can see, one by one we can make a difference. So for me, it was just that feeling of being compelled that I've just got to tell the story. And more than that, I really don't have a full explanation for, other than sometimes when you're just drawn to something, you say, I have to address this. I need to make a stand as one person. I think Margaret Mead spoke of that a lot, just that, it's the work of concerned individuals that can truly make a difference. And so with that, when I met with the family and spent all the time filming and all of that, I was looking at, as a filmmaker, to make a difference. And little by little and more, people kept coming to me for advice and what were my thoughts and what did I think worked. And so from my work with other schools, in addition to the initial filming and my interviews with bullying experts, psychologists, law enforcement officials, the judge who presided over the case, and many school officials and all that, I did form things that I would consider best practices, things that will help the situation, things that kids can do, things that parents can do, teachers, and this is a culmination of meeting with so many people